Well, speaking of other parts of the world, how did you find yourself here? We met very randomly. I was at CiTR Radio, where I'm sitting right here, on a Friday about a month ago, and I think Sarah, the music director, said this New Zealand guy that just wandered in, and he wants to find someone who's interested in his music. I said, send him in. And
yeah.
And so how did that happen?
It was a very happy happenstance.
Yeah.
So I had the privilege of being at the Pacific Arts Forum, which was being hosted at the UBC and MOA in Vancouver. And I took the opportunity to pop into your radio station to just while I was there. It was an incredible privilege to be up at that conference. And the PAA basically was the Pacific Arts Association, and they champion Pacific First Nations artists in particular, especially contemporary artists. And it was a real privilege. We were hosted by the Musqueam people, and it was really very moving to be hosted by them and to be in their presence, and to actually be in the presence of so many incredible artists from all around the Pacific, from Papua New Guinea, obviously Canadian artists, New Zealand, Australian, Samoan, Tongan, Fijian, and the list goes on and on and on, and it was really quite wonderful.
That's great, and I'm very glad that you popped in, because now you're opening my eyes so much to another part of the world's music. And
it was great to meet you, Matt. I'm really stoked.
Yeah, and we spoke of getting more of a connection and flow happening back and forth, which can be challenging given the distance. But these are how things start, and the internet.
Yeah, well, actually, I was absolutely because I decided to use the opportunity to go into a few stations. It really sort of opened my eyes that there is an opportunity here to really start a network more between student stations and individuals, private stations and labels, independent labels, to really get better communication going on what's going on, especially when you're working with alternative music, because it's really exciting. And I'm very passionate about First Nations music as well. So in Māori, we refer to it as Te Reo, which is Reo means the language, the spoken word, the Māori language. We're working with TeMatera Records to produce and distribute Māori music, and to hear that you guys are also, working with First Nations music, really excited me. And actually, when I got back to New Zealand, after I'd also been to Seattle, went to KXTR, I went over to Honolulu and saw the guys over there, KUTH Radio. There was actually a conference put on here by the Music Commission called Going Global, and as part of that they brought international speakers over, and had the privilege of meeting Brian. Now I can't remember his radio station name, out of New York, and I told him about my trip to the States, and he was really excited about that as well, and loved the idea of us all talking together and trying to share our music. So I think there's definitely potential. I'm gonna come back next year, I think, and come and see you again, Matt, and coming to visit more stations.
That's right. I mean, the vibrant First Nations musical community, at least of this city, I've discovered and played their music, so there's a whole world there that I can expose you to online.
I find that so exciting. Yeah.
I mean, this is the modern world. The benefits of the modern world. Globalization has been a little bit tricky for some aspects, but this is kind of one of the better aspects, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it was really quite humbling when we were talking with the Musqueam people, because in New Zealand, all First Nations people who've been colonised have a rough time. I mean, and there's no minimising any of that. Māori have been successful in organising their culture so that it is come back from the brink in as much as language, practice of carving, of weaving, of all the arts, has been maintained, and there's been a resurgence in that, and a pride in language. And yet when we came to speak to the Musqueam people, and they were talking about the battle that they've had with trying to maintain their language, and I asked them, how many people speak your language, and actually realised that the last person who spoke the language had died.
Oh no!
There was no one who was totally fluent. and that they're trying to get their language back. But just how important language is to identity. You know, just because you're, you know, for me, of course, I'm British, so I identify myself through where I'm from and my language and my culture. But imagine that I was forced to speak, say, you know, German, just for the sake of argument. The way you think in your mind is associated with language. So to really part of your culture, the language is really, really important in terms of the way thought structures are put together. And so it's so important that you know, First Nations people have the ability to maintain their language, protect it, and encourage the development of that in young people. Not just for the sake of the language itself, but actually for a cultural identity, a sense of belonging of who you are. Especially when you think that these are oral traditions we're talking about, being handed down from generation to generation. And how do you maintain that story if the language isn't truly understood? And understood at a core level, not just on a superficial level. So it was really humbling to hear about, you know, what they were doing to try and to reinvigorate that, and it was really quite saddening to realise that so much of that has been lost. I hadn't kind of realised that, you know, I think it was, I can't remember the actual numbers, but for the Coast Salish people it was something like 600 dialects or something like that. And then there were smaller tribal groups for those dialects. So whereas for Māori, you know, as a broad brush stroke, all Māori speak that language here. Not that all Māori do speak Māori, but that it's one language across both islands with minor differences in dialect depending on the iwi. But for the Coast Salish people, that wasn't the case. There's vast differences in language over that vast land in smaller groups of people. So when, you know, 75% of them, and I think in some instances even higher, were wiped out by disease, and, you know, basically having all of their lands, which were, you know, the historical hunting grounds, taken, and they were basically marginalised. That language and that culture was massively affected, and I think that I feel that it is our obligation to use the tools that we have in our digital age to, you know, do whatever we can to help from the fringes here, is to, you know, try and not so that other people are hearing it and that it is up there for forever, so that, you know, there's almost like a benchmark or a recording, say this is how it sounded. There is another challenge in that which I hadn't considered when talking to them, and that is that part of the culture for the Coast Salish. I don't know this, but I would imagine it might be this case for broader Coast Salish people across the whole region, is that actually some of the ritualistic songs are not for anyone else's ears. They're sacred, so actually what we would be allowed to put out there is not the actual really core important songs, because they're actually not meant for anyone else to hear. Challenges for themselves.
I see. But it's yeah. I mean, almost physically impossible to, like, it's just going to happen that groups can die out. So I mean, if you don't record it, it's going to be lost. It's simple. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's such a tricky thing to be respectful, but still be, you know, communicating about realities and
yeah.
And I guess giving people an insight into the technologies that are available. You know.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Definitely.
Wow.
There might be, for example, that there could be a way that they, and I probably shouldn't be saying this, it's talking out of turn really, I'm sure they considered it, recording it for their own benefit, that isn't released for anybody else, you know. But I think that's really important that this stuff is documented, and I mean that in terms of digitally, in terms of recordings, documents. I think it's something that, I mean, we've only just started. I mean, to date, we've only released with our partners, Tamaki Records, and those guys are amazing. I just want to say they're really investing in Turil specifically, and we're basically their production partner. So we work with them to produce the music and to distribute it. We sort of sit alongside them. So far we're in a development stage working with artists. We've released one single with Simone Holland, and Kayanga is the track, and I recommend everyone go to iTunes and check it out. It's very, very simple and quite beautiful, but it's just open your ears to hearing the sounds of another language, of another First Nations language, and Māori might not be something that you got that in the Northern Hemisphere and up there that people will be familiar with the sound of. So hear it, listen to it, and enjoy it. And we'll be putting a lot more of that music out, and we really would love to be the vehicle to disseminate lots of other First Nations music, contemporary music if we can.
Well, thank you, mate. That's amazing. I'm absolutely 100% sure we're going to be exposing listeners here to about. And
I'll send you lots of music.
Please do. Yeah. Okay, Matt. Well, we got plenty there. Is there anything else that you needed to talk about, or?
I guess the only other thing would be, is it appropriate not to talk about the Symphony of Screams album? I would just whether you use this or not, I'll just like to say that this is the second album from the Symphony of Screams, and I'm actually very proud of this album. I think that it's obviously the Symphony of Screams come from a darker place in terms of they're looking at life through the darker energies, if you like, of human experience. But and I actually for a while really kind of struggled with that as an individual who's trying to be conscious, and then I kind of realised that actually that darker side of looking at the world is equally as important as light. You can still actually be transformative in your message using those tools. And so the album has got some, it covers everything from political control through to there's a song in there called Katrina, Dirty Southern Slut Katrina, which refers to the hurricane that wiped out the southern states of America, and is dedicated to what those people went through, and summing up all sorts of human experience from loss through to all of those energies, really. But somehow it still feels like there's hope. It still has an element of sort of defiance to it, which says, yes, we experience these things, but it still has that kind of defiant, joyful energy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And particularly, there's two songs that I'm in love with at the moment. They change. Actually, it took a while to love any of them because I've been working on the album for so long that you kind of fall out of love with your own stuff. But now it's finished and I get a chance to listen to it objectively. Deceived, which was the first time the band's used samples in the album. We actually used the last speech of Kennedy, which talks about secret societies, which is absolutely incredible. I'd never heard it before when we were struggling to get lyrics to fit to the song, and a friend of ours said, "Oh, why don't you check out this particular speech?" And we heard it and went, "Oh my God, that's absolutely perfect for the energy of what we're trying to show here." And also the final song on the album, which is the title, which is called Symphony of Screams, and it's very defiant, but it's also got something that euphoric edge, that we actually, as people, do have a voice, that we can actually make a change, we can actually do something about the situation we find ourselves in, and that's okay, and don't be fearful. One last story to round up. While I was at the Pacific Arts Forum, there was a wonderful speaker there, a Haida artist, Michael, and I've forgotten his surname, and that's going to bug me, but he told a wonderful story at the forum. One of his stories that he's created paintings for and animations for. And there's a forest fire, and all the animals running out of the forest because of the forest fire, and they run down to the river. And there's the bear, and there's the beaver, and there's the wolf, and there's the elk, and the hummingbird. And the hummingbird goes to the river and picks up some water and flies back towards the fire. And the elk shouts up, "Hummingbird, what are you doing? You sure you will die?" And the hummingbird goes into the fire and comes back to the river and picks up some water and flies back in. And the bear says, hummingbird, come back, your feathers will burn. And the hummingbird goes back in, comes back to the river and picks up some water. And the beaver says to the hummingbird, hummingbird, what are you doing? And the hummingbird says, what I can. And so if we all just have that attitude that we just do what we can, and focus on our consciousness and the fact that we do have power, and that we do have the choice to make our world the way we want it to be, that's really where we're coming from.
It's such a great way to end it, and that is how I think each time I do the show, Victor Weck. So,
awesome.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, Matt. I'm really stoked that our paths crossed, and I look forward to speaking to you again.
For sure.